first sign is never the animal itself, it's the quiet, a silence that sinks over Montana's frozen plains like a warning. Birdsong disappears. The cattle stop grazing, even the wind seems to hold its breath. And then, somewhere beyond the pine line, comes the long, haunting howl that has echoed across these mountains for centuries. A wolf calls, then another, and another, until the valley trembles beneath a chorus announcing their return. Before we continue, hit subscribe. More stories like this are coming. This winter is different. Montana's farmers know it. Hunters know it. Even the state government knows it. For the past 3 years, wolf activity near ranches has surged unlike anything seen since the gray wolf was first reintroduced to the northern Rockies. Sheep farms, once considered safe, now sit on the front lines of a conflict between humans and an apex predator reclaiming its territory. In the small town of Darby, lifelong rancher Samuel Hargrove remembers the night everything changed. He describes a thick fog rolling across the fields, so dense even his security lights looked like small floating flames. Around midnight, he heard a crash, followed by frantic bleating. He ran out with a flashlight, expecting coyotes. But what he found was far worse. 7 wolves had broken through a reinforced fence, something no predator had done in years. They moved through his flock with terrifying coordination, each one knowing exactly how to force the sheep into corners where escape was impossible. By the time Samuel reached the pens, more than 30 sheep lay dead or dying. He recalls the sound that haunts him most even now, the silence afterward, just the cold wind and the crunch of snowfall beneath fresh wolf tracks. The USDA later confirmed the staggering scope of the damage. On average, each sheep lost to predators cost farmers around $150 to $200. Across the United States, more than 170,000 livestock animals are believed to be killed annually by wolves, bears, and coyotes, totaling over $25 million in losses. And that was before the crisis escalated. In Montana alone, protests erupted. More than 40,000 residents marched on the Capitol in Helena demanding clearer hunting policies, emergency response funding, and stronger protections for both wildlife and farmers. One sign stood out: "We're protecting wolves. Who's protecting us?" Montana lawmakers had no choice but to respond. Within weeks, controlled wolf hunting programs were expanded. Permits for livestock protection dogs doubled. And for the first time in decades, specialized training for wolf defense units became mandatory for new ranchers in high-risk zones. But even with government action, wolves proved more adaptable, more intelligent, and far more determined than anyone predicted. Hunters began noticing behavior changes. Wolves were traveling farther, operating in smaller but more efficient packs, and timing their attacks with uncanny precision, often just after storms, when visibility was at its lowest. To counter this, ranchers revived an old tradition: livestock guardian dogs. Not pets, not simple shepherds, but warriors, breeds descended from ancient mastiffs, Anatolian shepherds, bloodhounds, and mountain dogs, animals bred for centuries to face wolves head-on. These dogs, weighing 150 pounds or more, dive with the flock day and night. Their training is rigorous. They learn to flank wolves, chase them from the herd, and hold defensive positions. Hunters often fit them with GPS collars monitored from handheld receivers, a technology crucial during encounters where several wolves surround a single dog. By 2023, Montana reported a 40% reduction in wolf attacks on farms using guardian dogs. But wolves adjust quickly. Strong defenses simply force them to change targets. That's when the true challenge began. Winter storms pushed wolf packs closer to towns, but they were not the only predators on the move. As wolves became more cautious around ranches, a darker shape slipped from the mountains. Black bears, larger, hungrier, and far more destructive than wolves in crop territory. At first, farmers dismissed the signs: a few broken corn stalks, a tipped-over feeder, some deep paw prints in thawing mud. But soon they saw the full picture. Entire rows of corn flattened, Beehive boxes torn apart and emptied, barn doors warped from brute force. One morning in the Bitterroot Valley, farmer Emily Carter walked out to check her apiary. 32 hives, her entire honey business, were destroyed in a single night. Wood shattered, honey soaked into the grass, and prints the size of frying pans circled the devastation. The town called it the Night of the Giants. Black bear incursions in Montana rose by nearly 60% in a single season. Attacks caused an estimated $10,000 to $20,000 in damage per farm, with some losses exceeding $50,000. There are nearly 900,000 black bears across the U.S., a number many Americans don't realize is climbing every year. This forced state officials to issue Montana's first emergency-controlled bear hunting order in over a decade. But hunting a bear isn't like hunting a deer or even a wolf. Bears are fearless. They don't flee when shot. They fight. Hunters must undergo extensive certification, training in wilderness survival, firearm safety, emergency response, and even psychological readiness or for close quarters encounters. Experienced hunters choose high-caliber rifles such as the 45-70 Government or 30-06 Springfield, firearms capable of penetrating thick bear muscle and bone. But even with the best equipment, no one hunts bears alone. Hunters rely on hounds, swift, highly trained tracking dogs that can run up ravines, signal wind direction changes, and corner a bear long enough for a clean, safe shot. These dogs often save lives. If a wounded bear charges, humans stand little chance. Yet the hunting debate rages on. Conservationists argue that hunting threatens bear populations already pressured by shrinking habitat. Farmers argue that without hunting, their livelihoods, and sometimes their lives, are at risk. The Montana government attempted a compromise. Maintain controlled hunting quotas. Preserve bear populations through strict biological monitoring. Keep communities safe by enforcing distance restrictions near residential areas. Surprisingly, the combination worked. Bear-related crop damage dropped nearly 70%. The bear population stabilized at around 300,000 in Montana's broader regional ecosystem. And farmers finally saw hope. But nature never stops testing those who share its land. Because as winter turned to spring and predators retreated temporarily into deep forest, something entirely unexpected emerged. An ecological shift no one predicted, one that revealed a hidden truth about Montana's wilderness and the delicate balance between survival and devastation. And that is where the real story begins. Spring arrived in Montana with deceptive gentleness. Meadows thawed, rivers loosened their icy grip. For the first time in months, peace seemed possible. But the calm was an illusion. A hinge in the ecosystem had shifted, quietly reshaping predator behavior. Wolves, pressured by hunting season and guardian dogs, retreated deeper into the mountains. But hunger drove them back in new patterns. Instead of attacking large farms in coordinated packs, they began hunting opportunistically along forest edges, targeting young calves and sheep grazing near rivers. Farmers reported eerie behavior, wolves waiting silently in willow thickets, emerging only when fog rolled in. It was as if they had learned the rhythms of ranch life more intimately than ever before. And the bears, those enormous lumbering forces of destruction, were not simply descending for food anymore. They were adapting too. Some learned to travel under cover of darkness for miles, bypassing fences, picking locks on storage sheds, even rolling heavy barrels away from electric wire sensors. Predators were evolving faster than the solutions designed to stop them. One late April morning, ranger patrols near Seeley Lake found a puzzling scene. Wolf tracks overlapping fresh bear prints, both leading toward a private ranch. At first, investigators believed they were separate incidents, but what they uncovered over the next few weeks shocked even veteran wildlife experts. Wolves and black bears weren't competing. They were avoiding each other's territories with remarkable precision, as though each species recognized that direct conflict would waste precious energy. This territorial dance, compressed their movements into the same narrow corridors. Unfortunately, the same corridors where dozens of farms lay vulnerable. Farmers braced for impact, expecting another devastating wave. But what happened next was stranger. Predators changed their timing. Instead of full-force attacks, they launched quick, unpredictable raids. One or two wolves slipping through shadows, or a single bear breaking a fence panel before disappearing again. This behavior confused livestock guardian dogs. It confused hunters. It even confused state tracking systems. The attacks were smaller but constant, like pressure building in a crack no one could see. That's when Montana officials realized they needed something far beyond traditional hunting policy. They needed new technology. Drones equipped with thermal cameras were introduced first. Flying silently over ranches at night, they detected heat signatures, wolf packs moving in formation, solitary bears pacing the perimeters, even hidden dens in rock fields. For the first time, farmers could see predators long before they approached. Then came digital perimeter alerts. Small towers installed across ranches relayed data from sensors in fences, soil vibrations, motion paths, and temperature changes. When a predator approached, the tower sent an instant alert to the farmer's phone. These innovations saved countless animals. But nature still had one final test. In early June, a cold front swept across western Montana. Snow fell for 18 straight hours, unusual weather that forced wildlife into desperate movements. On the Carter Ranch, where Emily had lost her entire apiary to bears the previous year, all systems failed at once. Snow clogged the sensors, drone batteries froze, and during the quietest hour before dawn, a shadow moved along the fence, its breath steaming in the cold air. It wasn't a wolf, it wasn't one bear, it was three, huge black bears traveling together, something almost unheard of outside mating season. They headed straight for the calf pens. Inside the farmhouse, Emily's phone stayed silent. No alerts, no warnings. The only signal she received was the distant, terrified lowing of her cattle. She grabbed her jacket, sprinted through knee-deep snow, and saw the outlines of the bears pushing against the wooden enclosure. She screamed, not out of fear, but fury. And in that split second, her guardian dogs, two massive Anatolian shepherds, burst from their shelter and charged with a ferocity she had never seen in them. The bears hesitated. Then the first one lunged. Emily fired a warning shot. In Montana, warning shots mean nothing to desperate animals. But the noise was enough to confuse them long enough for one of the dogs to clamp onto the nearest bear's back leg. The bears turned and fled, knocking over a fence in their retreat. The calves survived. Emily survived. But the message was clear. Technology alone wasn't enough. It took human will, animal loyalty, and split-second decisions to protect a farm. After that night, Montana held an emergency hearing. Wildlife biologists, hunters, ranchers, conservationists all sat at the same table. For once, they agreed on one thing. The fight could not be won by one group alone. That summer, a new era of coexistence began. Hunters refined their strategies, focusing not on eradication, but on population balance. They worked with biologists to determine precisely which packs or bears cause repeated damage. Instead of blanket hunting zones, Montana introduced targeted removal operations. Highly trained teams sent only where needed. Farmers invested in hybrid fencing made from steel, treated wood, and shock lines that delivered mild but memorable electric pulses. Some added solar-powered sound deterrents that emitted wolf howls or bear roars depending on the detected species. Conservationists launched initiatives to restore natural prey, deer, elk, and fish populations, to reduce predator reliance on livestock, and something remarkable happened. Within 2 years, wolf-related livestock losses dropped nearly 45%. Bear incursions decreased by more than half, and the predator populations remained healthy, stable, and monitored. But the real breakthrough wasn't in technology or hunting or policy. It was in understanding, in recognizing that these vast, rugged plains had always belonged to wolves and bears long before farms existed. That conflict was inevitable, but catastrophe was not. That balance, not dominance, was the true goal. One evening as the sun dipped behind the crags of the Bitterroot Range, Samuel Hargrove, the rancher who once thought he'd lose everything, stood on a hillside overlooking his restored farm. Wolves howled in the distance. For the first time in years, he didn't feel fear. He felt respect. He knew the wolves were there. They knew he was there. And between them now existed a line, sometimes fragile, sometimes strong, but always there, a boundary forged from centuries of hardship, survival, and learning. The story of Montana's predators is not about extermination. It is about negotiation, a continuing bargain between humans and nature, each adapting, each challenging the other, each refusing to leave. As you finish the story, ask yourself, can humans truly live in harmony with the wild? Or are we merely temporary guests in a land owned by wolves and bears? Comment 1 if you believe controlled hunting is necessary. Comment 2 if you believe coexistence can be achieved without it. And don't forget to subscribe. More untold stories from America's wilderness await you.